Keep your head down! Keep your head down!
Keep your head down. Black Waitress saved a Mafia boss who didn't remember her. I saved your life once before, Marco Castellano. You never even knew my name. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken history. Marco's eyes widened as recognition finally dawned across his face. The water, he whispered, blood still seeping through his expensive shirt. You're the waitress from Bellini's. Lucia nodded, her steady hands continuing to apply pressure to his gunshot wound. 5 years ago. You were too busy looking at your phone to notice the Moretti brothers coming through the kitchen. You spilled that pitcher on me, right before the bullets came through the window. I told you to keep your head down, she said softly. This time, I hope you'll listen. Have you ever wondered what it means to save someone who might not deserve saving? What happens when fate brings two people together not once, but twice, through violence and blood? This is the extraordinary story of a woman who risked everything to save a dangerous man's life, and how that choice would come back to transform them both in ways neither could imagine. I'm Lucy, and today I'm sharing a tale of unexpected connection, second chances, and the power of compassion in the darkest of circumstances. If you've ever believed that a single moment can change the course of multiple lives, hit that like button and join me for this incredible journey. The first time Lucia Reyes saved Marco Castellano's life, she was just doing her job at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant nestled in the heart of the city. The kind of place where the wine list was longer than the menu and reservations were booked months in advance. The kind of place where people like Marco Castellano, head of the city's most powerful crime family, came to conduct business over handmade pasta and imported wine. Lucia had worked there for 3 years, perfecting the art of being present without being noticed. She knew which guests preferred still water over sparkling, which ones tipped generously and which ones never tipped at all. She knew which tables were reserved for romantic dinners and which ones were for business that couldn't be discussed in more public venues. And she knew trouble when she saw it. That night, Marco Castellano sat at his usual corner table, 3 bodyguards positioned strategically around the restaurant, his attention fixed on his phone as Lucia refilled his water glass. She had served him dozens of times before, but he had never really looked at her. To men like him, people like her were furniture, functional but forgettable. Would you like to hear tonight's specials, sir? She asked, her voice professional and pleasant. Marco waved his hand dismissively without looking up. Just bring the usual. As Lucia turned to leave, movement in the kitchen caught her eye. 2 men she didn't recognize slipped in through the back entrance, their hands concealed beneath their jackets. Something in their furtive movements, the tension in their shoulders, triggered an alarm in her mind. She had seen their faces on the news, the Moretti brothers, responsible for a string of violent restaurant hits targeting rival crime families. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Lucia saw the trajectory of what was about to happen with perfect clarity. The men would emerge from the kitchen. They would open fire. Marco Castellano, distracted by his phone, would be dead before he registered the danger. Without conscious thought, Lucia leaned close to Marco's ear. Keep your head down, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. Something in her tone made Marco glance up, meeting her eyes for the first time. In that fractional moment of connection, Lucia was already moving, the pitcher of ice water in her hands tipping accidentally across his lap. The shock of cold water sent Marco lurching backward, his chair toppling as he fell, precisely 3 seconds before bullets shattered the window where his head had been. What followed was chaos. Screams erupted as patrons dove for cover. Tables overturned. Marco's bodyguards drew weapons, returning fire as they moved to shield their boss. The Moretti brothers retreated toward the kitchen, still firing. In the pandemonium, no one noticed Lucia slipping out the service entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. By the time police arrived, she was blocks away, walking briskly through the night, knowing her life had just irrevocably changed. She never returned to Bellini's. Never collected her last paycheck. Never contacted any of her coworkers. Instead, she disappeared, understanding instinctively that in Marco Castellano's world, there were no innocent bystanders, only assets or liabilities. She had made herself neither by vanishing completely. With her grandmother's inheritance, Lucia moved to the outskirts of the city, changed her name slightly, and purchased a modest neighborhood tavern called the Blackbird. She built a quiet life, one where the only emergencies involved breaking up the occasional bar fight or calling cabs for customers who'd had too much to drink. For 5 years, she lived with the knowledge that she had saved the life of one of the city's most dangerous men. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if she had done the right thing. How many lives had been affected by Marco Castellano's continued existence? How much suffering might have been prevented if she had simply done nothing that night? Yet she couldn't regret her choice. It wasn't her place to decide who deserved to live or die. She had acted on instinct, on the fundamental belief that life itself was sacred, regardless of what someone had done with that life. Until tonight, when her past came bleeding through her door. The Blackbird was nearly empty, just a few regulars nursing their drinks as Lucia wiped down the bar counter. Monday nights were always slow, which was why she noticed immediately when the door swung open, letting in a gust of cold October air. The man who stumbled in was clearly in distress, one hand pressed against his side, blood seeping between his fingers. His expensive suit was disheveled, his face pale with shock and blood loss. Despite this, Lucia recognized him instantly. Marco Castellano looked up, his eyes scanning the bar before landing on her. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across his face. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor. "Call 911, shouted one of the regulars, already moving toward the fallen man. "No!" Lucia's voice was sharp with authority. "No police. Everyone out. Now." The few patrons stared at her in confusion. "Bars closed. Emergency. Drinks are on the house next time." Her tone left no room for argument as she moved swiftly to Marco's side, already assessing his injuries with practiced eyes. Reluctantly, the customers filed out, casting curious glances back at the scene. As soon as the door closed behind the last one, Lucia locked it and flipped the sign to closed. Kneeling beside Marco, she carefully pulled his hand away from the wound. A gunshot, as she had suspected. The bullet had entered his left side, but from what she could tell, it had missed vital organs. Still, he had lost a significant amount of blood. "Marco," she said firmly, tapping his face. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused with pain and blood loss. "Who?" "Someone who's about to save your life. Again." Lucia slipped her arm under his shoulders. "I need you to help me. We have to get you upstairs." With considerable effort, she managed to get him to his feet and guide him toward the back stairs that led to her apartment above the bar. By the time they reached her bedroom, Marco was barely conscious, his weight nearly dragging them both down. Lucia laid him on her bed, not caring about the blood that immediately began soaking into her clean sheets. She worked quickly, cutting away his shirt to better access the wound. The bullet was still inside, she could see where it had entered but found no exit wound. Drawing on her nursing training, Lucia gathered supplies, clean towels, antiseptic, bandages, a suture kit she kept for emergencies. She had never removed a bullet before, but she understood the theory. And Marco Castellano clearly couldn't go to a hospital, where gunshot wounds would be reported to police. "This is going to hurt," she warned him, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "But I need to get that bullet out before I can stop the bleeding properly." Marco's eyes opened slightly, his gaze surprisingly lucid despite his condition. "Why, helping me?" he managed to ask, his voice rough with pain. Lucia paused, meeting his gaze directly. Because everyone deserves a second chance at life. Even men like you, Marco Castellano. If you believe that our choices in critical moments reveal who we truly are, hit that like button. And if you're wondering what happens when a dangerous man wakes up in the care of the woman who saved his life twice, subscribe to Lucy Love Stories for the next part of this extraordinary tale. Marco awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of cotton sheets against his skin and the distant hum of a box fan. Pain radiated from his left side, but the fog in his mind suggested someone had given him something for it. He attempted to sit up, immediately regretting the decision as fire lanced through his ribs. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a woman's voice from the doorway. "The bullet missed your vital organs, but you lost a lot of blood." Marco's hand instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the woman, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, tired eyes that held no fear as she regarded him. She wore simple jeans and a faded t-shirt, and carried a tray with what appeared to be medical supplies. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rougher than intended. "Lucia," she answered simply, approaching the bed with measured steps. "You stumbled into my bar last night with a bullet in your side and no security detail. I made a choice to help rather than call the authorities." Marco studied her face, searching for recognition, for the gleam of opportunism he was accustomed to seeing in those who recognized him. He found neither. "Why?" he asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Lucia set the tray down and began preparing to change his bandage. "Because everyone deserves a second chance at life. Even men like you, Marco Castellano." The use of his name confirmed she knew exactly who he was. Yet there was something in her manner, a familiarity that suggested more than just recognition of a notorious crime boss. "We've met before," he stated rather than asked. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Yes. Though you wouldn't remember." Before he could press further, she carefully peeled back the blood-soaked bandage on his side, causing him to hiss through clenched teeth. The conversation paused as she worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound and applying fresh dressings. "You have medical training," he observed. "I was a nursing student. Before life took a different turn." Her hands were gentle but confident, betraying years of experience that didn't align with her current occupation as a bartender. Marco remained silent, cataloging details about his surroundings. The room was modest but clean, likely her bedroom, given the personal touches. A small bookshelf overflowed with medical texts and dog-eared paperbacks. A framed photograph on the nightstand showed a younger Lucia with an elderly woman, both smiling. "Your phone is gone," she said, anticipating his next question. "It was smashed when you fell. And before you ask, no, I haven't contacted anyone. That decision is yours to make when you're stronger." Marco's mind raced through possibilities. The ambush had been well coordinated, suggesting an inside source. His most trusted lieutenant, Vince, had been the only one who knew his movements that night, a test Marco had deliberately set after weeks of growing suspicion. Now he had confirmation, but at a cost. "How long have I been here?" he asked. 18 hours. Lucia secured the fresh bandage and straightened. "You need at least another day before you should even think about moving." Marco's laugh was bitter. "A day might as well be eternity in my world." "Then perhaps it's time to reconsider your world." Her words carried no judgment, only a quiet certainty that made him look at her more closely. "You speak as if you know me." Lucia gathered the soiled bandages, her expression unreadable. "I know enough." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "There's water and pain medication on the nightstand. Try to rest." As the door closed behind her, Marco found himself in the unfamiliar position of being at someone else's mercy, someone who seemed to want nothing from him. It was disconcerting in its novelty. Despite his training to remain vigilant, exhaustion soon pulled him back into darkness. The sound of knocking at the bar's front door startled Lucia from her thoughts. She froze, listening intently. The blackbird was clearly closed, the sign turned and lights off. Who would be knocking with such insistence? Moving quietly to the window that overlooked the street, she carefully peered through the blinds. Two men in dark suits stood at the entrance, their posture radiating impatience and authority. One of them was speaking into a phone, his expression grim. Lucia's heart raced. They had to be Marco's men, or worse, the people who had tried to kill him. Either way, their presence threatened everything. She slipped back upstairs, entering the bedroom where Marco still slept. "Marco," she whispered urgently, shaking his shoulder. "Wake up. There are men at the door." His eyes snapped open instantly, alert despite the pain and medication. "Describe them." Two men in suits. One tall with a shaved head, the other shorter with a scar across his jaw. Marco's expression darkened. "Vince's men. Not mine." He attempted to sit up, grimacing with the effort. "You need to get rid of them. They can't find me here." "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" Lucia asked, keeping her voice low. "Tell them you're closed for a family emergency. That you haven't seen anyone unusual. Be convincing." His eyes held hers. "If they find me here, they'll kill us both." The knocking grew more insistent, transforming into pounding that echoed through the empty bar below. "If I don't answer, they'll get suspicious," Lucia reasoned. "I'll handle it." She hurried downstairs, taking a moment to compose herself before approaching the door. She unlocked it but kept the chain in place, opening it just enough to peer out. "We're closed," she said firmly. "Family emergency." The taller man stepped forward. "We're looking for someone. A man who might have come by here last night. Well-dressed, Italian." Lucia frowned, the picture of confusion. "No one like that came in. Mondays are slow, just the usual regulars. Mind if we take a look around?" The man with the scarred jaw tried to peer past her into the darkened bar. "Actually, I do mind. My grandmother's upstairs, very ill. That's why we're closed." Lucia channeled all her fear into a convincing display of irritation. "Unless you have a warrant, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The men exchanged glances. "If you see this man," the taller one said, holding up a photo of Marco, "call this number immediately. There's a substantial reward." Lucia took the card he offered, glancing at the photo with practiced indifference. "Sure, whatever. Now please, I need to get back to my grandmother." She closed the door firmly, listening as their footsteps retreated. Only when she heard a car engine start and fade into the distance did she allow herself to breathe again. When she returned upstairs, Marco was sitting up, one hand pressed against his bandaged side. "They're gone?" "For now." Lucia sank into the chair beside the bed, adrenaline leaving her shaky. "But they'll be back. They're looking for you." "Of course they are." Marco's voice was grim. "Vince thinks I'm dead, but he'll want confirmation. No loose ends." "Vince, your lieutenant? The one who betrayed you?" Marco's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about Vince?" "You talk in your sleep," Lucia said simply. "And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that someone close to you arranged the hit." A tense silence fell between them. Finally, Marco spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "You should have let me die. Or turned me over to them. It would have been safer for you." "Probably," Lucia agreed. But I'm not in the habit of letting people die when I can help them. Even people like me? There was something challenging in his tone. Especially people like you. Lucia met his gaze steadily. The ones everyone else has given up on. If you believe that compassion can exist even in the darkest circumstances, hit that like button now. And if you're wondering whether Marco Castellano, a man who's built his life on power and control, can accept help from someone who wants nothing in return, subscribe to Lucy Love Stories for more tales that will touch your heart. When Marco awoke again, the quality of light filtering through the curtains suggested late afternoon. The pain in his side had dulled to a persistent throb, and his mind felt clearer. He carefully pushed himself to a sitting position, gritting his teeth against the discomfort. On the nightstand beside the promised water and medication sat a folded set of clothes, not his blood-soaked designer suit, but simple sweatpants and a t-shirt that would likely be too small. The gesture was practical rather than thoughtful, yet it struck him as significant. This woman, Lucia, continued to surprise him with her calm efficiency and lack of either fear or deference. Marco had built his empire on understanding people's motivations. Everyone wanted something: money, power, protection, revenge. Yet he couldn't pinpoint what Lucia wanted, and that made her dangerous in ways she probably didn't realize. The bedroom door opened without warning, and she entered carrying a tray with soup and bread. "You're awake," she observed. "Good. You need to eat something before taking more medication." Marco accepted the tray, studying her face. "You still haven't told me how we know each other." Lucia pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, her posture relaxed but alert. "Bellini's. 5 years ago. I was your server the night two of the Moretti brothers tried to take you out during dinner." Recognition dawned slowly as Marco sifted through memories. "The water," he said finally. "You spilled water on me right before the shooting started. I saw them come in through the kitchen. I recognized them from the news. They'd been connected to 3 other restaurant shootings that month." She shrugged slightly. "I reacted on instinct." "You saved my life," Marco stated, the realization settling uncomfortably. He didn't like owing debts, especially ones he hadn't known existed. "Why didn't you come forward afterward?" "My organization rewards those who prove themselves valuable." Something like disappointment flickered across her features. "That's exactly why I disappeared. I didn't want a reward, and I certainly didn't want to become valuable to your organization." The honesty was refreshing, if somewhat insulting. Marco was accustomed to people either fearing his power or seeking to benefit from it. Indifference was novel. "Yet here you are, helping me again," he pointed out. "Why?" Lucia met his gaze directly. "Because I believe people can change. Even someone like you, who's spent a lifetime building walls so high you can't remember what it's like on the other side." Her words struck with unexpected precision, finding cracks in defenses he hadn't realized were vulnerable. Before he could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, she continued. "Eat your soup. We can talk more after you've had something in your stomach." As she rose to leave, Marco found himself asking, "The bar downstairs, is it open tonight?" "No. I called in a family emergency. The Blackbird is closed until further notice." She paused at the door. "Don't worry, Marco. Your secrets are safe here. At least for now." The door closed softly behind her, leaving Marco with the unsettling realization that for the first time in decades, his life was entirely in someone else's hands, someone who had already saved it twice without asking for anything in return. Later that evening, Lucia sat at her small kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea and scrolling through news reports on her laptop. The attempted hit on Marco Castellano was nowhere in the headlines, a testament to how effectively his organization controlled information in the city. Or perhaps Vince was keeping the news quiet while he solidified his position. A floorboard creaked behind her. Lucia turned to find Marco standing in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame for support, wearing the clothes she'd left for him. The sweatpants hung low on his hips, and the t-shirt stretched tight across his shoulders, making him look strangely vulnerable despite his imposing presence. "You shouldn't be up," she said, closing her laptop. "I've been shot before." Marco moved carefully to the table, lowering himself into the chair opposite her. "Your medical skills are impressive. Where did you learn?" 3 years of nursing school before I dropped out." Lucia pushed her tea aside. "My grandmother got sick. I needed money more than education at that point." Marco nodded, his eyes taking in the modest kitchen with its mismatched chairs and chipped countertops. "And now you own a bar." "The Blackbird was my grandmother's. She left it to me when she died." Lucia's expression softened at the memory. "It's not much, but it's mine. It's a good cover. Quiet location, cash business, regular clientele who mind their own business." Marco's assessment was professional, almost admiring. "You chose well." "It wasn't a strategic decision," Lucia corrected him. "It was about honoring her memory and building something that couldn't be taken away." Marco's eyebrow raised slightly. "Taken away? By whom?" Lucia hesitated, then decided on honesty. "By people like you. The powerful who see others as either useful or disposable." Instead of taking offense, Marco laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face, making him look younger, almost approachable. "You really aren't afraid of me, are you?" "Should I be?" Lucia challenged. "You're in my home, wearing my clothes, alive because of my care. If anyone should be afraid, it's you." The amusement faded from Marco's eyes, replaced by something more calculating. "You know who I am. What I'm capable of. I know what the papers say. What rumors claim." Lucia met his gaze steadily. "I also know you haven't threatened me once since you woke up. That says something too." A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Marco broke it. "Those men who came looking for me, they'll be back. With more men. Vince is thorough." "I figured as much." Lucia sighed. "What do you suggest?" "I need to contact someone I trust. Someone who can help me get back to my territory without Vince's people spotting me." "And who would that be?" "From what I gather, your most trusted lieutenant just tried to have you killed." Marco's expression darkened. "My sister, Sophia. She has no official connection to my business, but she has resources. She's the only one I can be certain isn't involved in Vince's coup." "You want to use my phone to call her?" Lucia asked. "No. Phones can be traced, monitored. I need to get a message to her another way." Marco leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "There's a flower shop on Westmore Avenue. Sophia buys arrangements there every week. The owner, Mrs. Delgado, has been a family friend for decades." "You want me to go there," Lucia realized. "To pass a message. It would be safer than me trying to move in my condition. And Vince's men won't be looking for you." Lucia considered the request, weighing the risks. Helping Marco contact his sister would further entangle her in his dangerous world. Yet refusing would leave them both vulnerable when Vince's men inevitably returned. "What's the message?" she finally asked. Relief flickered across Marco's face. "Tell Mrs. Delgado that the prodigal son needs sanctuary. She'll understand. She'll get word to Sophia." "And then what?" "Then we wait. Sophia will send someone she trusts to extract me. Marco's expression grew serious. Once I'm gone, you should leave too. At least for a while. Vince is ruthless. If he discovers you helped me, he'll make an example of you. The casual way he spoke of her potential death sent a chill through Lucia. This was the reality of Marco Castellano's world, violence and retribution as simply the cost of doing business. I'll go in the morning, she decided. The flower shop will be less busy then. Marco nodded, then asked unexpectedly, why did you really help me, Lucia? The truth this time. Lucia considered the question, searching for an answer that made sense even to herself. 5 years ago at Bellini's, I acted on instinct. I saw someone in danger and reacted. But afterward, I had to live with the knowledge that I'd saved a man who hurts people for a living. And that bothered you. Of course it did. I wondered how many lives might have been better if I'd just let nature take its course. Lucia's voice grew quieter. But when you stumbled into my bar bleeding, I realized something. It's not my place to decide who deserves to live or die. That kind of judgment isn't mine to make. So it's about moral superiority, Marco concluded, a hint of bitterness in his tone. No. Lucia shook her head firmly. It's about believing that everyone has the capacity to change. Even you. Marco stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You don't know me, Lucia. You don't know what I've done. I know enough, she replied simply. I know you haven't always been the man you are now. No one is born into this life, they choose it, or it chooses them. Which means different choices can still be made. If you've ever believed that our past doesn't have to define our future, hit that like button now. And if you're wondering whether a hardened crime boss can be changed by unexpected compassion, subscribe to Lucy Love Stories for more tales of redemption and second chances. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, perfect weather for Lucia's mission. Fewer people would be out, making her less likely to be noticed or remembered. Remember, just ask for Mrs. Delgado specifically, Marco instructed as Lucia prepared to leave. Don't mention my name to anyone else. Just the message, the prodigal son needs sanctuary. I understand. Lucia pulled on a raincoat and grabbed her purse. Try not to die while I'm gone. I've already invested too much in keeping you alive. A hint of a smile touched Marco's lips. I'll do my best. The flower shop was a small, elegant storefront nestled between a bookstore and a cafe. The bell above the door chimed softly as Lucia entered, bringing with it the heady scent of lilies and roses. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked up from an arrangement she was creating. Good morning, dear. How can I help you today? I'm looking for Mrs. Delgado, Lucia said, keeping her voice casual despite her racing heart. That's me. The woman smiled warmly. Are you looking for something special? Lucia glanced around, ensuring they were alone in the shop. I have a message. The prodigal son needs sanctuary. The change in Mrs. Delgado's demeanor was immediate. The grandmotherly warmth vanished, replaced by sharp alertness. She quickly moved to the door, flipping the sign to closed and drawing the blinds. Marco sent you? She asked, her voice low and urgent. Yes. He's injured but stable. Hidden at my place. And who are you to him? The question carried suspicion. No one, Lucia answered honestly. Just someone who helped him when he needed it. Mrs. Delgado studied her face intently, as if searching for deception. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded once, decisively. Wait here. She disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with a small, wrapped package. Give this to Marco. Tell him Sophia will send her people tonight at midnight. 3 knocks, then 2. Anyone else is not to be trusted. Lucia accepted the package, which was heavier than its size suggested. I understand. You've taken a great risk helping him, Mrs. Delgado said, her expression softening slightly. Marco doesn't forget those who stand by him in difficult times. I don't want anything from him, Lucia replied firmly. The older woman smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. That, my dear, is precisely why he'll remember you. As Lucia turned to leave, Mrs. Delgado added, be careful going home. Eyes are everywhere in this city. The warning sent a chill down Lucia's spine as she stepped back into the drizzling rain. She pulled her hood up, keeping her head down as she made her way back toward the Blackbird, the package secure inside her coat. She was 2 blocks from home when she noticed the black SUV moving slowly along the street behind her. Casual enough not to draw attention from others, but deliberate in a way that triggered her instincts. Lucia turned down a side street, quickening her pace slightly. The SUV followed. Heart-pounding, she ducked into a busy coffee shop, weaving through the morning crowd to exit through the back door into an alley. She took a circuitous route back to the Blackbird, doubling back several times to ensure she wasn't followed. By the time she finally slipped in through the bar's back entrance, nearly an hour had passed since she'd left the flower shop. Marco was waiting in the kitchen, tension evident in his posture despite his casual stance. You were gone too long, he said, relief and accusation mingling in his voice. I was followed. Lucia handed him the package. At least, I think I was. Black SUV, tinted windows. I lost them, but they were definitely looking for someone. Marco unwrapped the package quickly, revealing a handgun and a burner phone. Sophia came through, he murmured, checking the weapon with practiced ease. She'll send extraction tonight at midnight. Then this is almost over, Lucia said, unable to keep the relief from her voice. Marco looked up, his expression unreadable. You'll need to leave too. Once I'm gone, this place won't be safe for you. I can't just abandon my bar, my home. You can and you will, Marco's voice hardened. Vince doesn't leave witnesses or loose ends. If he discovers you helped me, he'll burn this place to the ground with you in it. The blunt assessment hung in the air between them. Lucia knew he wasn't exaggerating. She had seen enough news reports about mysterious fires and accidents befalling those who crossed the city's crime families. Where would I even go? She asked, the reality of her situation sinking in. I have properties outside the city. Places Vince doesn't know about. Marco's offer was casual, as if lending a vacation home to an acquaintance. You can stay at one until this is resolved. And when will that be? When Vince is dead. Lucia challenged. When you've killed enough people to reclaim your throne? How does this cycle ever end, Marco? Something flashed in his eyes, anger, perhaps, or frustration. This is the world I live in, Lucia. The world you stepped into when you decided to help me. Twice. It doesn't have to be, she said quietly. You could walk away. Start over somewhere else. Marco laughed, a harsh sound without humor. And do what? Get a regular job? Live in the suburbs? That life isn't for men like me. How do you know? Have you ever tried? The question hung between them, unanswered as the burner phone in Marco's hand suddenly buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. It's Sophia. There's a problem. He looked up at Lucia, his eyes hard. Vince's men are watching the Blackbird. They know I'm here. Lucia felt the blood drain from her face. How? Someone must have recognized me when I came in. Or they've been tracking all possible hiding places. Marco was already moving, checking the gun with practiced efficiency. We need to leave. Now. Before they make their move. But your extraction isn't until midnight, Lucia protested. We don't have until midnight. Marco's voice was grim. Pack whatever you can't live without. We have minutes, not hours. As if to emphasize his point, the sound of tires screeching to a halt outside the bar reached them. Lucia moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds. 2 black SUVs had pulled up, men in dark suits emerging with weapons visible. Back door, Marco ordered, grabbing her arm. Now. Lucia snatched her purse and a photo of her grandmother from the wall as they moved swiftly through the bar toward the rear exit. Behind them, the sound of the front door being forced open echoed through the empty space. Stop, Marco whispered, pulling Lucia into the shadows behind the bar as footsteps entered the main room. He positioned himself in front of her, gun raised, his body a shield between her and the approaching danger. There's another way out, Lucia whispered, her lips close to Marco's ear. Through the cellar. There's an old tunnel that connects to the building next door. Prohibition era. Marco glanced at her, surprise evident in his eyes. You never mentioned this. I never thought I'd need it, she replied, already moving toward the small door behind the bar that led to the storage room. They slipped through silently as heavy footsteps spread throughout the main floor of the Blackbird. Lucia led Marco to a trapdoor hidden beneath a worn rug, lifting it to reveal a narrow wooden staircase descending into darkness. Stay close, she murmured, taking a small flashlight from a shelf. The tunnel's old and not entirely stable. The cellar was cool and damp, filled with boxes of liquor and bar supplies. Lucia moved confidently through the maze of storage, toward the far wall where an ancient wooden door was partially hidden behind stacked crates. My grandmother showed me this when I was a child, she explained as she worked to clear the path. Said it might come in handy someday. I never believed her. Smart woman, your grandmother, Marco observed, keeping his voice low as he helped move the crates. The door creaked as Lucia pulled it open, revealing a narrow brick tunnel stretching into darkness. Above them, the sound of furniture being overturned and doors being kicked in grew louder. They're searching room by room, Marco said grimly. We need to move. The tunnel was barely wide enough for them to walk single file, the ceiling so low that Marco had to hunch slightly. Lucia led the way, her flashlight illuminating decades of cobwebs and crumbling mortar. Where does this lead exactly? Marco asked, his breathing slightly labored from the exertion and his injury. The basement of what used to be a jazz club, now a laundromat. The owner's never there, it's all self-service machines. They had gone perhaps 50 yards when a crash echoed behind them, the sound of the cellar door being discovered. Shouts followed, then the beam of flashlights cutting through the darkness. Run, Marco urged, pushing Lucia ahead of him despite the pain evident in his movements. They reached the end of the tunnel just as gunfire erupted behind them, bullets ricocheting off brick walls. Marco returned fire, providing cover as Lucia struggled with the rusted door that blocked their exit. It's stuck, she gasped, throwing her weight against it. Marco joined her, his shoulder pressing against the ancient wood. With a groan of protesting hinges, the door finally gave way, spilling them into the dusty basement of the laundromat. Block it, Marco ordered, already scanning for exits. Lucia dragged a heavy metal shelf in front of the tunnel door as Marco found the stairs leading up to the main floor. The laundromat was mercifully empty, the hum of machines masking their hurried footsteps as they emerged onto the street. This way, Marco said, taking Lucia's hand and pulling her toward a side alley. We need to get off the main streets. They moved quickly through the maze of back alleys and service roads, Marco setting the pace despite his injury. Lucia could see the strain in his face, the way his hand occasionally pressed against his wounded side, but he never slowed. Where are we going? She finally asked as they paused in the shadow of a loading dock, catching their breath. Somewhere Vince would never think to look for me. Marco checked the burner phone, typing a quick message before pocketing it again. My mother's old house in Riverside. It's been empty since she died, but I kept it off the books. No one in my organization knows about it. Riverside is miles from here, Lucia pointed out. How do we get there without being seen? Marco's smile was grim. We walk. Stay in the shadows. Avoid main streets and security cameras. You're in no condition to walk that far, Lucia protested, eyeing the growing bloodstain on his shirt where his wound had reopened. I don't have a choice. Neither do you. His expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Lucia. I never meant to bring this down on you. The genuine regret in his voice surprised her. I made my own choices, she reminded him. Both 5 years ago and now. They continued their careful journey through the city's forgotten spaces, abandoned lots, construction sites, the concrete channels beneath overpasses where the homeless sometimes sheltered. Marco moved with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the city's hidden geography, while Lucia followed, increasingly concerned about his deteriorating condition. By late afternoon, the skies had darkened with approaching rain, providing additional cover as they finally reached Riverside, an older neighborhood of modest homes that had once been fashionable but now showed signs of neglect. Marco led her to a small bungalow set back from the street, partially hidden by overgrown hedges. The house had a forgotten quality, with faded paint and shuttered windows, yet the yard, while overgrown, showed signs of basic maintenance. Someone keeps an eye on it, Lucia observed as Marco retrieved a key from beneath a weathered garden statue. I pay a local kid to mow the lawn occasionally. Keeps the neighbors from complaining. Marco unlocked the door, ushering Lucia inside before securing it behind them. The interior was like stepping into a time capsule, furniture draped with sheets, family photos still hanging on walls, a thin layer of dust covering everything. Marco moved through the space with reverence, his fingers trailing lightly over covered furniture. I haven't been here in years, he admitted quietly. Not since the funeral. Lucia watched as he uncovered a sofa, sending dust motes dancing in the dim light filtering through the shutters. You were close to her? She was the only one who ever stood up to my father. Marco's voice held a rare vulnerability. She never approved of the family business, but she protected me in her own way. Made sure I had something outside of that life, music lessons, books, normal things. She sounds remarkable. She was. Marco sank onto the sofa, the events of the day finally catching up with him. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. There's a first aid kit in the bathroom. Down the hall, second door on the right. Lucia found the kit exactly where he said, along with clean towels that smelled faintly of mothballs. When she returned, Marco had removed his shirt, revealing the blood-soaked bandage beneath. You've torn your stitches, she observed, kneeling beside him to examine the wound. I need to clean this and redo them. Marco nodded, his jaw tight with pain as Lucia carefully removed the bandage. The wound was angry and red, but showed no signs of serious infection, a small mercy given everything they'd been through. As she worked to clean and restitch the injury, Lucia found herself studying Marco's torso, not just the fresh wound, but the map of old scars that told the story of a violent life. Bullet wounds, knife scars, evidence of broken ribs and surgeries. You're staring, Marco observed, his voice strained but amused. I'm wondering how many times you've cheated death, Lucia replied honestly. Too many to count. Though the two most memorable times involved you. Lucia secured the fresh bandage, her fingers lingering briefly on his skin. There. Try not to run through any more tunnels or get into gunfights for at least a few days. Marco caught her hand as she started to pull away. Thank you, Lucia. Not just for this, but for everything. Few people would have done what you did. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, they remained frozen in that position, his hand holding hers, their eyes locked in a gaze that communicated something neither was ready to put into words. The moment was broken by the buzz of the burner phone. Marco released her hand to check the message, his expression shifting back to business. Sophia's people are looking for us. I need to let her know where we are. He typed quickly, then set the phone aside. They'll come at dawn. Until then, we wait. And after that? Lucia asked, gathering the medical supplies. What happens when you go back to your world? Marco was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant. I take care of Vince. Restore order. Make examples of those who betrayed me. And the cycle continues, Lucia said softly. More violence, more retribution, more blood. It's who I am, Lucia. There was resignation in his voice, but also something else, a question, perhaps, or a challenge. It's who you've been, she corrected him. Not who you have to be. If you believe that our darkest moments can lead to our greatest transformations, hit that like button now. And if you're wondering whether Marco will choose revenge or redemption when dawn comes, subscribe to Lucy Love Stories for the conclusion of this extraordinary journey. As night fell, the old house creaked and settled around them. Lucia had found candles in a kitchen drawer, unwilling to risk turning on lights that might be visible from the street. The flickering glow cast long shadows across the living room where they sat, sharing a meal of canned soup and crackers discovered in the pantry. Tell me about your life before all this, Marco said unexpectedly. Before Bellini's, before the Blackbird. Lucia looked up, surprised by his interest. It was ordinary. I grew up with my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Went to public school, got a scholarship to nursing school, worked restaurant jobs to make ends meet. And then? Then my grandmother got sick. Cancer. The treatments were expensive, even with insurance. I dropped out to care for her and work full-time. Lucia's expression softened at the memory. She fought hard, but in the end, we knew she was ready to go. She left me the Blackbird and enough money to get it running properly again. You loved her very much, Marco observed. She was everything to me. My parent, my teacher, my best friend. Lucia smiled faintly. She used to say that life gives us exactly what we need, even when it doesn't give us what we want. Wise woman. She would have hated you, Lucia said with unexpected candor. Everything you represent, the violence, the power games, the disregard for ordinary people caught in the crossfire. Marco didn't take offense. Most good people would. Yet she also believed everyone deserves a second chance. That no one is beyond redemption. And you? What do you believe? Marco's eyes were intent in the candlelight. Lucia considered the question carefully. I believe we become what we practice being. If you practice violence and control long enough, that's who you are. But if you practice something else, compassion, maybe, or honesty, you can become someone different. Simple as that? There was skepticism in his voice, but curiosity too. Not simple at all. Probably the hardest thing in the world. Lucia met his gaze directly. But possible. I've seen it happen. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of rain beginning to fall outside. Marco rose carefully, moving to the window to peer through the shutters at the darkened street. No sign of Vince's men, he reported. But they'll be searching every corner of the city by now. Will your sister's people be able to get through? Sophia has resources even Vince doesn't know about. She'll find a way. Marco returned to the sofa, sitting closer to Lucia than before. You should try to rest. Tomorrow will be complicated. I'm not sure I can sleep, Lucia admitted. Too much adrenaline. Then talk to me. Tell me something else about your ordinary life. The request seemed genuine, as if Marco truly wanted to understand a world so different from his own. Lucia found herself sharing stories of her childhood, her grandmother's eccentric habits, her dreams of finishing her nursing degree someday. Marco listened with unexpected attention, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. In turn, he shared carefully edited stories from his own life, his mother's passion for classical music, his teenage rebellion against his father's expectations, his sister Sophia's fierce intelligence and loyalty. As the night deepened, their conversation grew more personal, the barriers between them lowering in the intimate darkness of the candlelit room. Lucia found herself seeing beyond the notorious crime boss to the man beneath, complex, intelligent, shaped by circumstances but not entirely defined by them. You could have been someone different, she observed as their conversation lulled. In another life. Perhaps. Marco's voice was thoughtful. But we don't get other lives. Only this one, with all its mistakes and consequences. It's never too late to change the story, Lucia said softly. To write a different ending. Marco studied her face in the flickering light, something unreadable in his expression. You really believe that, don't you? That people can change, even someone like me. I have to believe it, Lucia replied. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? The intensity of his gaze made her heart beat faster. For a moment, it seemed he might say something more, might bridge the invisible distance between them. Instead, he reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected gentleness. You should have been a philosopher, not a bartender, he said, his voice low. You see possibilities where others see only what is. Before Lucia could respond, the burner phone buzzed, breaking the moment. Marco checked it, his expression shifting back to business. Sophia's people will be here in 3 hours. We should prepare. The practical concerns of their situation reasserted themselves as they discussed extraction plans, safe houses, what Lucia would need to bring with her. Yet something had shifted between them, a connection formed through shared danger and unexpected understanding. As the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, they stood at the window, watching the empty street for signs of either rescue or threat. Marco's expression was resolute, his mind clearly already turning to what awaited him, the confrontation with Vince, the reclaiming of his position, the punishment of those who had betrayed him. What will you do? Lucia asked quietly. When this is over? Marco understood the real question behind her words. What I have to do. What's expected? Is that really what you want? More violence, more enemies, always looking over your shoulder? It's not about what I want, Marco replied, his voice hardening. It's about responsibility. Consequences. My father built something, and I inherited it. I don't have the luxury of walking away. Everyone has that luxury, Lucia countered. It's just a question of what price you're willing to pay for it. Before Marco could respond, the sound of a car engine broke the pre-dawn silence. A black sedan with tinted windows turned slowly onto the street, moving with deliberate purpose toward the house. Sophia's people or Vince's? Lucia whispered, tension evident in her voice. Marco's hand moved to the gun tucked into his waistband. We'll know soon enough. The sedan stopped directly in front of the house. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a woman emerged, tall, elegant despite the early hour, with Marco's same commanding presence. Sophia, Marco breathed, relief evident in his voice. 2 men exited the car after her, taking positions that allowed them to scan the street in both directions. Sophia approached the house with confident steps, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "It's time," Marco said, turning to Lucia. "Are you ready?" Lucia looked around at the candlelit room where they had shared stories and possibilities through the night. In a few minutes, they would step outside, and everything would change. Marco would return to his world of power and violence. She would go into hiding until the danger passed. The connection they had formed would be severed by the reality of who they were and the lives they led. "Marco," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Before we go, I need you to know something. What happens next is your choice. Not your father's legacy, not your organization's expectations. Yours. Remember that." Marco studied her face for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle, questioning touch that lasted only seconds but communicated volumes. "Thank you for saving my life," he said as he pulled away. "Both times." With that, he moved to the door, gun ready, preparing to step back into the world he had always known. Lucia followed, carrying nothing but her purse and the photograph of her grandmother, leaving behind the sanctuary they had briefly shared. As they stepped onto the porch, Sophia's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Lucia, a question forming in her expression as she looked between her brother and the woman at his side. "Marco," she greeted him, her voice controlled despite the emotion in her eyes. "It's good to see you alive." "Thanks to Lucia," Marco replied, his hand resting briefly on Lucia's back as he made the introduction. "Twice now." Sophia's gaze sharpened with interest. "Twice." "It's a long story," Marco said. "One for safer locations." Sophia nodded, "All business now. The car's secure. We have a safe house prepared. Vince's men are concentrated downtown, but they've set up checkpoints on major roads out of the city. We'll take the river route," Marco decided, his hand still resting lightly on Lucia's back as they moved toward the sedan. Less chance of being spotted. As they approached the car, one of Sophia's men opened the rear door. Marco gestured for Lucia to enter first, then paused, scanning the quiet street one last time before following her. Inside the car, the atmosphere shifted immediately to one of tense professionalism. Sophia sat across from them, her elegant appearance belied by the calculating intelligence in her eyes as she assessed Lucia. "So you're the mysterious savior my brother mentioned," she said as the car pulled away from the curb. "Twice, apparently." "Lucia owns the Blackbird," Marco explained before Lucia could respond. "She was also at Bellini's 5 years ago. The water incident." Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. "The waitress who disappeared. We looked for you, you know." Marco wanted to thank you properly. "I didn't want thanks," Lucia said simply. "I just wanted to live my life in peace." "And now?" Sophia's question was pointed, her gaze moving between Lucia and her brother with undisguised curiosity. "Now I need to ensure her safety until this situation with Vince is resolved," Marco replied, his tone making it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. Sophia raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she turned to business, updating Marco on the organization's status in his absence. "Vince moved quickly after the hit. Told the captains you were dead, claimed you'd named him successor. Most believed him, or pretended to. And those who didn't? Carmelo and Russo are holding their territories, waiting to see proof. The others fell in line behind Vince." Sophia's expression hardened. "He's been making changes. Breaking agreements you put in place. Pushing into territories we've respected for years. Starting a war," Marco concluded, his jaw tightening. "One he can't win, once they know you're alive." Sophia leaned forward. "The question is how we announce your return. Publicly, to undermine his position? Or quietly, gathering strength before striking? Lucia listened to this discussion of territory and power plays with growing unease. This was Marco's world, calculated violence and strategic thinking, where human lives were reduced to assets and liabilities. So different from the man who had shared stories with her by candlelight just hours ago. The car turned onto a narrow road that ran alongside the river, moving away from the city center toward the industrial district. Through the tinted windows, Lucia watched the urban landscape give way to warehouses and shipping yards, the early morning light casting long shadows across empty loading docks. "We have a boat waiting," Sophia explained, noticing Lucia's questioning look. Faster than trying to navigate around Vince's roadblocks. They pulled up to a private dock where a sleek motorboat was moored, its engine already running. Two more men stood guard, nodding respectfully as Sophia emerged from the car. "Everything's ready," one reported. "No sign of pursuit." Marco helped Lucia from the car, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. "Stay close to me," he murmured as they approached the dock. The morning air was cool and damp, the river a slate gray beneath the cloudy sky. As they boarded the boat, Lucia felt a strange sense of finality, as if she were crossing a boundary beyond which nothing would be the same. Sophia took the wheel while her men secured the moorings. Marco guided Lucia to a seat near the stern, positioning himself beside her as the boat pulled away from the dock and accelerated downriver. "Where are we going?" Lucia asked, raising her voice slightly over the engine's hum. "A property I own outside the city," Marco replied. "Remote, secure. You'll be safe there until this is over." "And you? Will you be staying there too?" Something flickered in Marco's eyes, regret, perhaps, or resignation. "I need to deal with Vince. Reclaim what's mine." The words hung between them, a reminder of the reality they faced. Despite everything they had shared, Marco was still who he was, a man whose life was built on power and control, whose world operated by rules of violence and retribution. As the boat rounded a bend in the river, the city skyline came into view behind them, glass towers catching the morning light, the familiar silhouette of buildings where ordinary lives continued, untouched by the power struggles that shaped the shadows. Lucia thought of the Blackbird, probably already ransacked by Vince's men. Her home, her business, the life she had carefully built, all gone now because she had chosen to help a wounded man who stumbled through her door. "You're thinking about what you've lost," Marco observed, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Not lost," Lucia corrected him. "Sacrificed. There's a difference." "I'll make it right," he promised. "When this is over, you'll have a new bar, better than before. Whatever you want." Lucia turned to him, studying his face in the morning light. "That's not what I want, Marco. Things can be replaced. It's the choices we make that define us, that's what matters." Before he could respond, Sophia called out from the wheel, "We've got company." A speedboat had appeared behind them, closing the distance rapidly. Even from a distance, the men aboard were visibly armed. "Vince's people," Marco concluded grimly, reaching for his gun. "How did they find us?" "Someone must have been watching the house," Sophia replied, pushing the throttle forward. "Or they tracked the car." The boat surged forward, but the pursuing vessel was faster, designed for speed rather than comfort. Sophia's men took up defensive positions, weapons ready as the distance between the boats narrowed. "Get down," Marco ordered, pushing Lucia toward the floor of the boat as the first shots rang out across the water. The next few minutes were chaos, the roar of engines, the crack of gunfire, the boat lurching as Sophia executed evasive maneuvers. Marco returned fire alongside Sophia's men, his expression cold and focused, all traces of the vulnerable man from the night before gone. This was Marco Castellano in his element, calculating, lethal, commanding. Lucia watched from her position of relative safety as he coordinated with Sophia's men without words, their movements synchronized through years of similar conflicts. A bullet splintered the wood near Lucia's head, sending her ducking lower. Marco's response was immediate and devastating, 3 precise shots that sent one of their pursuers tumbling into the river. The speedboat continued gaining despite their evasive tactics. Soon it was alongside them, close enough that Lucia could see the determined faces of Vince's men. "We can't outrun them," Sophia shouted over the engines and gunfire. "We need to make a stand." Marco's eyes met Lucia's for a brief, intense moment. In that look was everything they had shared and everything left unsaid between them. Then he turned to Sophia. "No," he said, his voice carrying a finality that silenced even his sister. "No more bloodshed. Not like this." Before anyone could react, Marco moved to the radio mounted near the wheel. "This is Marco Castellano," he broadcast, his voice clear and commanding. "I want to speak to Vince." The pursuing boat maintained its position, but the gunfire paused. After a tense moment, the radio crackled to life. "Marco." Vince's voice was smooth, controlled despite the obvious surprise. "Reports of your death were clearly exaggerated." "Clearly," Marco agreed. "We need to talk, Vince. Not like this, with guns and blood in the water. Face to face, like men who respect each other." Sophia stared at her brother in disbelief. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Marco ignored her, his focus on the radio. "What do you say, Vince? One conversation before this goes any further. For old time's sake." A long pause followed, tension thick in the air. Finally, Vince's voice returned. "The old boathouse. 1 hour. You, me, and 2 men each. No more." "Agreed," Marco replied. 1 hour. As the radio fell silent, the pursuing boat peeled away, its engine roaring as it turned back upriver. Sophia immediately cut their speed, turning to Marco with fury in her eyes. "Have you lost your mind? It's a trap. Vince will never honor those terms." "Probably not," Marco agreed calmly. "But it buys us time and creates an opportunity. An opportunity to get yourself killed." Sophia's voice rose with frustration. "After everything we've done to extract you safely." Marco's expression remained resolute. "Take Lucia to the safe house. Keep her protected no matter what happens." "Marco, no," Lucia interjected, rising from her crouched position. "Don't do this. Not for me, not for your organization, not for some misguided sense of honor." He turned to her, his eyes softening slightly. "This isn't just about honor, Lucia. It's about choices, like you said. About who I want to be." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Lucia could respond, Marco continued, addressing his sister again. "Sophia, I need your phone. An untraceable one." Though clearly unhappy, Sophia handed over a sleek black device. Marco stepped away, dialing a number from memory and speaking in low, urgent tones that Lucia couldn't quite make out. When he returned, his expression was calmer, more certain. "Change of plans. We're all going to the safe house. Together." "And Vince?" Sophia demanded. "We'll get exactly what he deserves," Marco replied. "Just not in the way he expects." If you believe that our most defining moments come when we're forced to choose between who we've been and who we want to be, hit that like button now. And if you're wondering how Marco's confrontation with Vince will change everything, subscribe to Lucy Love Stories for more tales of redemption and transformation. The safe house was a modern cabin nestled in dense woods, its large windows overlooking a secluded lake. Inside, the space was surprisingly warm and inviting, more retreat than fortress, though Lucia noted the sophisticated security system and strategic layout that allowed for easy defense. Marco had been mostly silent during the remainder of their journey, his expression thoughtful rather than tense. Now, as Sophia's men secured the perimeter, he stood by the window, watching the road they had traveled. "You're not really planning to meet Vince, are you?" Lucia asked, joining him at the window. "No," Marco admitted. "That would be suicide, as my sister pointed out." "Then what was that call about? What are you planning?" Marco turned to face her fully. "Something I should have done years ago. Something that might actually break the cycle, as you put it." Before he could elaborate, Sophia entered the room, her expression still troubled. "Everything's secure. Now will you please explain what's happening?" Marco gestured for both women to sit. "I called Commissioner Reeves." Sophia's eyes widened in shock. "The police commissioner? Have you completely lost your mind?" "Possibly," Marco acknowledged with a hint of a smile. "But I've been thinking about what Lucia said, about choices and consequences, about the cycles of violence we perpetuate." He paced slowly, gathering his thoughts. "Vince's betrayal isn't just about me. He's been making deals behind my back for months, with the Moretti family, with the cartels we've kept out of our territory. He's willing to flood our neighborhoods with drugs we've always prohibited, to allow human trafficking we've always opposed." "So you take him out," Sophia said, as if it were the obvious solution. "Reassert control." "And then what?" Marco challenged. "Wait for the next Vince? The next betrayal? The next war? When does it end, Sophia?" The question hung in the air between them. Lucia watched the siblings, sensing a fundamental shift in Marco's thinking that his sister hadn't yet grasped. "I gave Reeves everything," Marco continued quietly. "Financial records. Names. Operations. Evidence of Vince's new alliances. Enough to dismantle not just Vince's operation, but most of our organization." Sophia stood abruptly, her face pale with shock. "You're destroying everything Father built. Everything we've protected." "Why?" "Because it's destroying us," Marco replied simply. "Has been for years. You know it as well as I do, Sophia. The constant vigilance, the violence, the betrayals. What kind of life is that?" "It's our life," she insisted. "The only one we've known. Which is exactly why we can't see beyond it." Marco's voice was gentle now. "It took someone outside our world to show me there could be something else." His gaze shifted to Lucia, gratitude and something deeper evident in his eyes. Sophia followed his look, understanding dawning on her face. "You're doing this for her," she realized. "For a woman you barely know." "I'm doing it for myself," Marco corrected her. "Because of what she helped me see. There's a difference." Sophia sank back into her chair, the implications of Marco's decision washing over her. "What happens now? To us?" "Reeves has offered immunity in exchange for testimony. For both of us." Marco sat beside his sister, taking her hand. "We have accounts overseas, legitimate businesses that aren't connected to the organization. We can start over, Sophia. Live without always looking over our shoulders." "And Vince?" "Will be arrested within the hour, along with most of his lieutenants. The evidence I provided is irrefutable." Sophia was silent for a long moment, processing this radical shift in their future. Finally, she asked, "Does this have something to do with Mother? With this being her anniversary?" Marco looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I hadn't realized the date." But perhaps, on some level, she always wanted something different for us. She would be proud, Sophia said softly, squeezing her brother's hand. Terrified, but proud. As the siblings shared this moment of understanding, Lucia felt like an intruder on something deeply personal. She moved toward the door, intending to give them privacy, but Marco's voice stopped her. Lucia. He rose, crossing to where she stood. None of this would have happened without you. Without your courage at Bellini's, without your compassion when I showed up at your bar, without your words these past days. I just did what felt right, she replied simply. The rest was your choice. A choice I might never have seen without you. His voice lowered, meant for her alone. When this is over, when things settle, I'd like to see you again. Not as the man I was, but as the man I'm trying to become. The request was tentative, vulnerable in a way the powerful crime boss had never allowed himself to be. Lucia studied his face, seeing beyond the hardened exterior to the person beneath, someone capable of change, of growth, of choosing a different path despite everything that had shaped him. I'd like that, she said softly. Very much. 6 months later, a new cafe opened on the outskirts of a coastal town hundreds of miles from the city they had left behind. Second Chances, the simple sign read, with a small blackbird logo beneath the name. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, comfortable chairs, bookshelves lining the walls, the scent of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. Behind the counter, Lucia arranged pastries in a display case, pausing occasionally to chat with customers or recommend a book from their collection. Her hair was shorter now, her smile easier, her movements no longer carrying the vigilant tension of someone always looking over her shoulder. The door chimed as a new customer entered, a man whose elegant casual clothing couldn't quite disguise the natural authority in his bearing. Yet there was something different about Marco Castellano now, a lightness in his expression, a relaxed quality to his movements that spoke of burdens released. The usual? Lucia asked with a warm smile as he approached the counter. Please. Marco leaned against the counter, watching as she prepared his coffee. How's the morning been? Busy. Mrs. Alvarez's book club is in the corner. They're debating that mystery novel you recommended last week. Marco glanced around the cafe with evident satisfaction. Full house again. This place is becoming quite the local institution. People like having somewhere to connect, Lucia observed. Somewhere that feels like home. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the cafe windows, casting a golden glow across their joined hands, Lucia thought of her grandmother's words, life gives us exactly what we need, even when it doesn't give us what we want. She had never wanted to save a dangerous man's life. Had never wanted to lose her bar or flee her home. Had never wanted to be part of a world of violence and power struggles. Yet those unwanted circumstances had led her here, to this moment, this connection, this possibility of love with a man who was remaking himself day by day, who looked at her as if she were a miracle he still couldn't quite believe. Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead us exactly where we need to be. Sometimes saving someone else becomes the key to saving ourselves. And sometimes, keeping your head down in a moment of danger is the first step toward finally looking up and seeing a future you never imagined possible. If this story of unexpected connection and transformation touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to be reminded that second chances are always possible. Leave a comment about a time when kindness changed everything in your life, and join our Lucy Love Stories family by subscribing today. Remember, the most powerful stories aren't about perfect people making perfect choices, they're about flawed, complicated humans finding the courage to choose differently today than they did yesterday. That's where true transformation begins. Thank you for joining me for this journey of redemption, connection, and the extraordinary power of compassion in the darkest of circumstances. I'm Lucy, and I'll see you in our next story of love and transformation.